ECG's total revenue reported for January 2024 was 820.45 million. That is 68.59 million US dollars. Out of that, 512.835 million Ghana cedis, that is $43 million, was allocated to 6 level AIPPs. The remaining 307.615 million Ghana cedis was then allocated to SOEs, regulators, and some other IPPs. For January 2024, ECG paid 120 million Ghana cedis, that is $10 million, instead of the allocated 512.835 million Ghana cedis, that is the $43 million. According to the PURC, ECG's non-compliance to the President's directive led to a shortfall of 394.383 million Ghana cedis, that is $33 million US dollars, to level A beneficiaries. This is where we are. It is heavily indebted. But its CEO, Managing Director, Samuel Dubik, says there is no Dumsor. Everybody wants to stay with the fact that there is Dumsor. If there is Dumsor, that means there is a generational gap or a generational problem. But many say what they experience is what they are talking about. There definitely is Dumsor. And that is why many people cannot join Newsfile this morning on their television. As we understand, the problem may just have started, and we haven't seen the worst yet, because it is set to get worse. Nobody wants a Dumsor regime. The Ghana card, doing wonders and seeking to give us a clean and empowered society. About 45,000 passports, which do not exist in the passport database, have been identified. Fake, because of the Ghana card. 130,000 NHIS cards, which do not exist in the database, have been identified. Fake. Another 45,000 driver's licenses, which do not exist in the database, have been identified. Fake. 166,000 SNIT cards, which do not exist in the database, have been identified. Are we on the path and in the course to creating a clean society with the Ghana card? It's now available to babies. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini. We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. You're welcome back. And here is Samson's take. Breaking news. Chief Justice, 2 judges lock up a nurse at the Supreme Court. 2 others go to his rescue over murder and a dozen felonies. In 2015, the judiciary was brought to its knees to purging it of corrupt elements. The country was hit with a massive scandal as 180 officials were caught on camera taking bribes and extorting money from litigants. 34 of them were judges, and Chief Justice Georgina Wood was swift in sanctioning the culprits according to law. The man who had been celebrated for risking his life to name, shame, and help the state jail greedy nation wreckers at our borders, ports, orphanages, hospitals, etc. Anas Aremeyao Anas was behind the camera that caught the judges. He would soon become public enemy to the powerful and their followers when he beamed his cameras on corrupt football gods and politicians. On 20th November 2018, he sought refuge in the High Court over a period of sustained vilification. His person and methods of undercover journalism were under severe attack. The MP for Asin Central and failed MPP flag bearer Kennedy Ejapong would blow the cover off a member of the Tiger Eye investigative team on television. Ahmed Hussein Swali was murdered shortly after. Anas Aremeyao Anas gathered and placed before Justice Eric Barr as many as 28 statements, labeling him a fraudster, thief, blackmailer, promoter of illegal mining, murderer of an MP, JB Dankwa, abettor of the murder of several Chinese and many other felonies. But on the 15th of March, 2023, not only did the judge deny him the 25 million Ghana cedis compensation he sought, he pronounced him guilty of all those crimes, stopping short of throwing the man he convicted of doing investigative terrorism into jail. Many joined Anas in deprecating the judgment as a travesty, which he appealed and also mounted a certiorari application in the Supreme Court to quash it. On the 28th of February, Chief Justice Gertrude Saki Tokonu and Henrietta Mensah Bonsu backed Samuel Esiedu in dismissing his application. The long wait for the judgment expected on the 4th of March ended yesterday. In the 97-page 3-2 majority decision, they hold that Justice Eric Barr did no wrong in his use of, quote, strong words, and quote, and or, quote, crudeness of his language, quotations close, because he was simply assessing and evaluating facts and evidence before him. And that's exactly the job of a judge. Anas is accused of indirectly seeking to gag the judge by accusing him of bias or prejudice, hate and personal dislike. They insist that the appropriate method to question the analysis, inferences, findings, and conclusions of the judge is by an appeal and not resort to the supervisory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court to quash the judgment. More so when this process does not allow them to go into the record of the trial. The first of the two grounds for the certiorari application, being that the judge lacked jurisdiction, was roundly and unanimously dismissed by all 5 judges. They argued that the fact that Eric Barr did the case as a relieving judge and would be reassigned by Chief Justice Enin Yeboah to continue the case at the request of Mr. Ejapong, at a time that court got a substantive judge, does not invalidate the judgment. And in any case, Anas did not object, but participated fully to the end. If Anas had won, will he be complaining of injustice? Justice Esiedu quizzes. They seem to advise that if he had any such complaints, he should have raised it while the trial was ongoing. Now the minority, dissent, led by Justice Emmanuel Yoni-Kolendi, violently disagreed with the three. He and Justice Isufu Umoro Tanko Amadou, after referencing the judicial oath and reciting cases that cautioned judges against what the High Court judge did, cited a plethora of cases that support granting Anase Certiorari on the grounds of lack of fairness, bias, or prejudice. They praised the judge for beautifully outlining the law on defamation, but condemned him for failing to apply it and rather acting injudiciously, capriciously, demonstrating hate for Anas and his methods of journalism, and literally convicting him of crimes in a civil suit without due process, without evidence, and without the opportunity of being heard. It is an explosive dissent, but I share only a couple of the paragraphs of what will definitely dominate discussions in legal circles and the public in the coming week. First, Justice Yoni-Kolendi. He says, I find it even more perplexing that a court exercising civil jurisdiction will find that the applicant, that's Anas, is guilty of having taken bribes and being dishonest, fraudulent, a cheat, an extortionist, a thief, a blackmailer, and corrupt. Equally baffling is the trial court finding that a description of Anas as a criminal, murderer, extortionist, blackmailer, corrupt, land grabber, tax evader, bribe taker, cheat, interferer in the administration of justice, email hacker, among others, are truthful and factual. He says, there can be no greater affront to the rights and honor of a litigant who resorts to the sanctuary of justice to vindicate his rights than this preconceived, biased, prejudiced, and ill-motivated views which the trial judge held of Anas even before he embarked on a trial of the case before him. Needless to say that the trial judge was merely pretending to adjudicate, even though he was already harboring these opinions of Anas and animosities against him for his work, methodologies, and prominence. He continued, I must hasten to emphasize that it matters not whether or not these statements were made within jurisdiction, as even statements made within jurisdiction may evince a latently held bias or prejudice harbored by a judge for or against a party. Then he continued, just sharing just a few of them with you. He continued, he said, that Anas is, to say the least, a victim of judicial defamation, a violation which, in my view, is more grievous that his complaint against the interested party, that is Kene Japan, which landed him before the trial court in the first place. He had other very harsh words, but I conclude on this. He says that the judge's personal reservations, disapproval and dislike for Anas and his modus operandi had poisoned his mind, blinded and disabled him from being an open-minded and impartial adjudicator of the matters before him. He says, what the judge did were indicative of a deep-seated personal dislike of the person and investigative methods of Anas. One would ask, was Anas on trial for murder, terrorism, or the host of other crimes that were imputed to him by the judge. He says the judge only stopped short of sentencing Anas. This type of unrestrained, intemperate judicial arbitrariness, motivated by obvious personal dislike of a citizen, in the sanctuary of justice of all places, ought to be deprecated, disapproved, and rejected in the strongest terms. The toxic, caustic, and unsavory descriptions of Anas by the trial judge is a classic example of a violent abuse of judicial power, privilege, and prerogative in the deployment of language under the guise of judgments. What did his brother say? Briefly, Tanko Amadou said, with all due respect to the judge, it is my view that it is obvious that he was actually actuated by his self-conceived notion of Anas's supposed improper investigative methods and thus discarded the core issues before him. In fact, the judgment as rendered was indubitably informed by these personal dislikes and against Anas, and not based on the law and evidence placed before the judge. From a reading of the judgment, it is obvious that the judge deliberately set up the delivery to assist the cause of Kennedy Japan. Lastly, Justice Tanko says, I must express my admiration for the judge for his elaborate and erudite evaluation of the law on defamation. While I expected that, based on the law so propounded, the judge would apply same to the facts and evidence, the judge, unfortunately, did not just descend into the arena of conflict, but pursued a line of what, in my view, is an improper reliance of extraneous matters against Anas, which were not relevant in the determination of the suit, which associate Anas with criminality. This was at a stage of the proceedings where Anas was not and could not have been heard on those matters. And that will be my take. Look for the judgment and enjoy it. Explosive. My guest in the studio, Dr. Kwabena Donkor, MP Pru East and former Minister for Power, Ben Boakye, Executive Director, ASEP. Richard Ahiagwa joins us shortly. He is Director of Communications of the New Patriotic Party. We'll be right back.
Not too sure where the blame lies, but the truth of the matter is the hospital's tariffs were not structured to generate these monies, because at the end of the day, the users of the service, which are you and me, are not paying for the utilities. They are paying for the reagents, they are paying for the basics, but they are not paying for the water and electricity that is used to provide these services for them. Suddenly, the hospitals are being told, you've got to cough out from that same money, and Parliament is saying, no, if we approve your new rates, the citizens can pay. So what are you telling the hospitals? You are tying their hands behind their back, and the ECG is also backing up. And you hear Richard saying, oh, it's about 4.5%, and he doesn't understand why the ECG would go after that. I understand why the ECG would go after that. Because at the end of the day, health is a public service good, and health affects everybody. The minute you cut off a hospital, you've cut off the morgue, you've cut off the operating theater, you've cut off the renal dialysis unit, you've cut off the cancer unit, you've cut off the pediatric NICU. It would affect everybody one way or the other. Like you said in Akan, Ankawa, Ebekawoba, Ankaoba, Ebekawofa. So they are targeting something that would bring the entire nation to the negotiation table, because they are also being pressured by the IMF and by all of us saying there's Dumsor, there's no Dumsor, it's partial Dumsor, it's Doom Frefe, Doom Sisi.
So, Kwame Siedu Sapong, there in an interview with Evans Mensah, very concerned about the ECG's approach as it goes around seeking to collect its debts, including from health facilities. Kolebu owes in excess of 10 million Ghana cedis. 37 Military Hospital owes in excess of 33 million Ghana cedis. Ridge Hospital, over 41 million Ghana cedis. Komfo-Anokye Teaching Hospital, over 27 million Ghana cedis. University of Ghana Hospital, some 2.2 million Ghana cedis. And the list goes on and on. There are those who owe health facilities who owe, in Accra alone, a total of 130.6 million. In the Ashanti region, they owe in excess of 50 million Ghana cedis. In the Western region, 22.3 million. In the Central region, 21.3 million. In the Volta region, 15.2 million. In the Eastern region, 21.3 million. And these are not all the health facilities in these regions. Ben Boakye, is this a matter of ECG not having money? And that's why we're being plunged into darkness and officials are playing the ostrich. This is not Dumsor. What is it?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Samson. I think at this point, I mean, everybody see the light go off once in a while in their communities. Others are punished more than others because there isn't an official way of delivering a fair approach to this load management that we're seeing. And the fact of the matter is that we don't have enough generation. And a couple of factors account for that. We have plants that are on maintenance. Even before that, the gas at this point are almost at peak. So we need at all times some amount of liquids to be able to meet the demand. And that also become a problem because we don't have the cash flow to be able to do that. And I also agree that there are some of these load shedding that are localized. Of course, transformers may go off at some point. But the big reality is that if you're shedding 500, sometimes 600, sometimes 400 megawatts of load, which is from generation, you cannot attribute that to localized outages. It is significant enough for you to communicate that properly and manage it so that people can plan their lives. Because 600 megawatt out of this economy is significant, it's huge.
What's our total consumption?
It's between 3,600, 3,700 sometimes megawatts. So, yes, on the average, you're looking about 3,500 megawatts of power. So if you take 600 megawatts of that demand off, it is quite significant. It impacts the entire economy. And therefore, enabling people to plan then becomes extremely important. And so that has been the challenge that we're having to grapple with.
You said we don't have enough generation.
Yes, so a couple of factors.
I need you to explain that in the face of what we have been told repeatedly since this regime assumed the reins of government power, that the NDC brought in just too much power and there is excess we don't need and we are paying for. What does that mean? We don't generate enough and yet we have excess.
Well, so when you put the installed capacity in Ghana together, you're in excess of 5,000 megawatts. But installed capacity is different from available, dependable capacity. I mean, you can talk about even T3 that has installed. It's been there for more than a decade. It cannot give you a kilowatt of power. So the fact that it's installed doesn't mean that you can get power out of it. So we have a lot of those power plants that cannot give us power. There are some of the installed generation like KTTP that are expensive to run because one is a single cycle plant, and also most times you have to give it liquid fuel to run. So you may be there, if you don't have the extra money to buy fuel to be able to run it, you cannot run it. And then also you have installed generation capacity that may be going on maintenance or may have been broken down. Like we have a unit at TAPCO down, we have a unit at TICO down. They are not available even though they are installed, so you can't get power out of them. We have Ameri 250. It's been down for the past 2 years, because we say we want to relocate, we want to do this, and we packed it, essentially. So it is installed, but it's not available to be used. So at all times, you need to be able to give a clearer picture of what dependable capacity we have. And Greco is able to do that. They're able to give you plants that are available, plants that can generate power.
If we have installed capacity of in excess of 5,000 megawatts, and all we need, averagely, is 3,500, and yet we are in darkness. Is it a question of incompetence or cash?
I would say a mixture of them. I mean, if you drill down to the cash situation, for example, ECG's liabilities every month, how much they're supposed to raise to be able to meet, the cash flow requirement of the sector is about 1.9 to 2 billion cedis every month. And they are averagely doing about 800. The peak they've done is about 1 billion and 22. All right, so you see the gap. So we need about 1 billion more to be able to meet the needs of the industry. So power that has been handed over to ECG to go and sell and collect that revenue so that they can share to those who are generating, those who are buying fuel, those who are transmitting, and anybody else within the chain is short by 1 billion every month. All right? So if you are running that deficit, then you're always playing catch-up. You're trying to see who do I address quickly so that I can get the power running. Who is making noise, whose generator is threatening. Let me go and pay some money so that, I avert, a deficit in generation. So that catch-up then has not been working. And therefore, we always have to rely on the budget. We need government to now intervene to say that if ECG is not able to collect enough revenue, then I have to come in and pay some of it. As to the extent that now, on the average, every month, Ghana has to cough 250 million Ghana cedis to be able to take part of the under recoveries that are happening in this space. Beyond that, also, government essentially is paying for gas, all right? Because we have contracted ENI and other upstream producers, and it's take or pay. So they produce, the gas is used to generate electricity, is sold to ECG and everybody else. We can't recover the money, so government has to pay for it. So the bill always comes to the table of government, for government to pay. And sometimes the government also struggles.
So now
to raise the money
lives and livelihoods are threatened. Will people's expectations be met? They simply want their lights on. They have the money. They want the lights on. It's not that they can't afford to pay their bills. They are paying for the bill. They are paying the bills anyway.
I think those of us in the space, what really worries us is not just keeping the light on. All right, but at what cost are you keeping the light on? Like I indicated, if we keep the light on and you are creating a deficit of 1 billion every month, all right, and government says, okay, I'm going to take up that bill and sacrifice education, sacrifice health infrastructure, sacrifice the roads, and go and give that to ECG to be able to meet it. That's not management of our energy sector. And that is what we have been doing. We have been sacrificing the budget of Ghana to be able to meet these inefficiencies that sometimes are deliberately created, all right, and then undermining development of the country just because of the energy sector problems. So there's a bigger picture to it that we need to make sure that we are not, because it is government and government has money, sacrificing everything else just to keep the light on and pretend to make people happy. And that for me is a bigger problem that we have to deal with at this point. So how do we get to that long-term situation where we have a power system everywhere in the world? Power is business, all right? It is money.
Yeah.
And people sell power, they're able to make money, government does not intervene, and the system runs.
The economy literally runs on the fuel of power.
Absolutely. So we need to get to that situation where, we have a power system that runs, without government intervention and pumping in these billions every year just to make the people happy.
So, can I hear you from where you sit, knowing all that you know? What's the way out?
I think the way out is
because,
really...
as I understand, this is bound to get worse.
So, if government buys fuel today, we can have the power running. You can have the lights on. But it's not sustainable for government to be doing that. It's not sustainable for us to be sacrificing the budget, to be paying for fuel that even if we were going to give the fuel to ECG and be guaranteed that they will sell the power and recover the money, it wouldn't be a problem. It would be a one-off expenditure. But it's become a recurrent expenditure. That government knows that you are throwing money at these entities and nothing will come out of it. All right? And that is a big drain. And for us, we need to revisit that conversation about bringing the private sector investment and allowing the regulators to regulate it. And we have a system where we have PURC, we have Energy Commission, who are supposed to be regulating the space. And what they are doing is regulating state entities that are so recalcitrant. And they're essentially just watching them do anything. And they can't regulate them. The way to make regulation work is to bring in the private sector, and the state regulates them, all right, to make sure that they are efficient, they are delivering value for the people. And you can't regulate yourself. And essentially that's what we are
Tell us again,
who
is causing the debt that is getting me sleep in the darkness even when I have bought power?
It's ECG. ECG is not able to collect its revenue, and NETCO as well. The distribution companies.
Where's the debt from?
They can't collect revenues. So if you track...
I don't understand. Why can't they collect?
So
they are selling power. We are buying the power. So what is it?
So, that's a bigger question for them to answer. And really, people steal power. And that's why some of us have criticized what they are doing and, questioning it as just optics, going to government facilities to go and disconnect them when those are bills you can actually trace and The government is not running away to anywhere. You can go to government and say, you owe me, negotiate and get government to pay you. You don't go threatening the one you know, and the over 30% that you cannot account for. The technical and commercial losses of ECG is about 30%. What that simply means is that if you give them $2 billion worth of energy every month, they cannot account for almost 600 million. That goes to waste. And the government money you are chasing is not up to that money. Beyond that, also, government is paying every month 250 million for some of your suppliers in the space. So the hard work of going after those who are stealing power, we are not seeing traction in there. The inefficiencies even within the ECGs that we are not seeing traction how they're dealing with it.
Help my viewers and listeners understand this. I don't get it.
Well, I would just say karma is a beautiful bitch. We are back to square one. And I like the question about excess
capacity. After you boldly announced that Dumsor was over, and in fact, Dumsor was over, you say we are back to square one. Is that what you mean?
Yes, precisely because there is also this mistake, especially from the media or in the media space, as if energy is static. Energy is dynamic. Demand grows. The composition of even the demand changes. Then the financing. So the solution you had yesterday will no longer be tenable tomorrow because the external environment, the operating environment will have changed. For example, prior to 2015, the real challenge, the major challenge was capacity. Generating capacity was a challenge. Of course, there was the finance, the fuel. Prior to 2015 or 2016, we did not have domestic gas. And so we're so dependent on Nigeria and gas. And therefore, our fuel was gas, and liquid, light crude oil. Those were the dominant fuels. Today, light crude oil is almost no longer in the equation. And so we would have solved the problem in 2015. But if you do not sustain, if you do not maintain, if you do not update your methodologies, in 2024, you could have a similar problem. So that will not negate the fact that at one point, the problem was solved. My major challenge now, Ben was talking about plants going down for maintenance. It is for this specific reason that we have a reserve margin. Do we have the adequate reserve margin? If we had the adequate reserve margin, 1 or 2 plants down for maintenance will not create the situation we are in. But our major challenge today is money to buy fuel. If we had all the existing plants running, we would be eating into our reserve margin, but we could maintain some amount of consistency on lights being on. We don't have the money. And we don't have the money. Unfortunately, in the power sector, we have allowed political partisanship. We've allowed propaganda to replace economics, to replace management, and to replace technical competence.
What do you mean by that?
For example, you raised the question of excess capacity. Let me give you 2 quick examples. On the 14th, 2 days ago, our peak demand off-peak was 2,830 megawatts. Our forecast off-peak was 3,169 megawatts. ECG had to share 300 megawatts off-peak. Then peak, the demand was 3,744 megawatts. The peak capacity availability was 3,070 megawatts. ECG had to shed 650 megawatts. But this is not the whole story. We are also shedding on average 150 to 200 megawatts on exports. When you have a weak currency, when you are unable to collect what you have sold, the export source becomes a major and critical source of revenue because it's paid in Forex. You use that to buy the equipment you need for your maintenance, etc. When you are also shedding that, we are only thinking of what ECG shares, but we are also shedding, especially sales to CEB. We are shedding exports. So the situation is really bigger than we see. VRA's finances today have been crippled by lack of sufficient export.
What does it mean we are shedding exports?
We are contracted to sell power.
Correct.
To Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, Burkina.
They have money to buy. We are not ready to sell.
And they pay us on time in hard currency. We are unable to supply the contracted quantities.
Why?
Because we don't have enough money to buy fuel to generate and sell to them. And we are losing Forex. Remember, under Professor Mills Mahama, one of the objectives in 2009 was to make Ghana a major power exporter. That was the vision. And when the West African power pool arrangement came in, one of our objectives was to take advantage of that and make Ghana. And we are probably the best country, if you look at geography, to supply West Africa. We sit bang in the middle of West Africa. We can export to the left, we can export to the south, we can export north. This is an opportunity we've not been able to utilize because of our own internal challenges.
What do we do where we are now?
We will first of all have to look at 2 things. ECG will have to look at its own internal cost control, not just ECG, all across board, ECG, NETCO, GRIDCO, MVRA. Cost management has never been a priority for us in the public space. I'm the ranking member on state enterprises. And across our SOEs, cost control, decisions are more procurement-led. So we will have to change the dynamics.
There's waste.
In plain English, yes, a lot of waste.
How is it manifested in ECG and the other related
if you are not collecting, you buy power and sell. What you take is only about 70% of what you purchased. We have technical losses that we attempted to redress by the injection of the about 500 million from the compact. Unfortunately, we messed up with that implementation and we lost that. Again, arising out of greed. And I say this on record. If we were not greedy, the original compact had foreign partners in the concession with about 20% get indigenous equity in the concession. There's a change in government. Certain another government comes, no, Ghanaians must have 51%, and foreigners who were bringing in the capital, who were bringing in the know-how, who were bringing in the skill set, the new mindset should have 49. It automatically leads to loss of boardroom control. So all the big boys pulled out. If we're not greedy, if we stayed with the 20% and allowed the big boys to come in with the investment, apart from the 500 million that we're going to get from the compact, they were also contracted to bring in other investment. We have been pumping about $1 billion into the distribution center. Our biggest challenge now is underinvestment. ECG is claiming a number of transformers are outdated, they are old, they need to be replaced. How do you replace that when you don't have the cash flow? You need investment. And we established ECG as a company. This is so critical. Most people ignore that.
You're saying they are collecting about 70% of what?
Of what they sell.
What they sell.
Yes.
What can they do when, as you look at it, only health facilities cumulatively are owing in excess of 260 million Ghana cedis?
There is a lot they can do, but that is what is known. The bigger challenge today is the plain thievery, what we cannot even account. If you can account for the fact that, look, this person owes you, that is one. At least in your books, you know this is revenue. It's just that it has not translated into cash flow. But there is technical inefficiency, what we call technical losses. Then there is plain commercial losses, plain thievery.
And you guys say the technical losses amount to about how much? 30%.
Technical and commercial combined, about 30%. Yes, close to 30%. To cure the technical losses, the major input is going to be investment. We have to inject capital.
What's the standard allowable losses?
Depending on the jurisdiction.
30% not too much.
You should not even be about 8%.
Yes, within 8, 14.
Depending on the jurisdiction, the more developed the system.
So there are a lot of work to do.
There's a lot of work to be done there. But let's not also forget, we are also suffering from the effects of the poor macroeconomic management. Let's also not forget, the payables of the power sector are dollar denominated. The receivables are CD denominated. So when the CD today, the parallel market 13.6, the official market 13.1 CDs to the dollar. So when the CD deteriorates that much, the amount of CDs you now need to collect to pay for your fuel is, and then to pay your IPPs increases hugely. So if we had a stable currency, planning becomes easier. Payment in terms of CD terms also becomes easier.
Okay. Richard, so this is a very bad time for you, because the citizens who you are going to ask for their votes in December are now asking you that you said you were better managers of the economy. You said never again, we'll never take you back to Dumsor. They are simply not interested in the explanations. All they want is their lights on.
Well, Samson, thank you very much, and very good morning to Ben and Doug. First of all, I think you're right. The Ghanaians voted for us to solve the problem, and I think that when this government came into office, its primary goal was to fix the problem, and started fixing the problem in earnest. And I think that the evidence of that is out there for people to see. 2017, 18, 19, the growth. Doc mentioned the macroeconomic management. All the indicators were properly aligned. So in terms of government owning the problem inherited and doing all it can to fix it, the record is demonstrable and people can see that. But on the issue specifically of Dumsor, I think that the first thing, and I think that is in order to do, is to apologize to Ghanaians. I think that that conversation has to be emphasized clearly, that what they want is the lights on. And this government had committed to do that until, I think March this year has not been very great. So I think that it's in order to acknowledge that. But I want to thank Ben particularly because his exposition on the matter has made it very simple, that it is not, as my brothers in the NDC have been in a hurry to politicize the issue, and that is the problem. Because they are in a hurry to equalize, to say, oh, we had Dumsor and you also have Dumsor. And that, for me, is the particular problem until this morning, listening to Ben, and the issue is laid bare. That is a practical problem of under-recovery. So you put a certain amount of power out there, or VRA Netco supplies that amount of power, and then you go to retail that power. Your recovery versus the cost of the power given to you to retail, there's a mismatch. And based on what we're learning, about 30% short of the full cost that you're supposed to recover. It's a practical problem. This one is not an issue of when Dumsor happened before and it was a question of generation and all that stuff. It is just a question of efficiency, recovery of ECG.
In his conclusion to the question, the answer to my question is that this is a matter of cash and incompetence.
Right.
Mixed.
Right.
That was the charge you leveled at the NDC.
Right. Well, so at this point, we have seen the source of the problem. Back then, it was a mix of issue, which cash related to procuring the gas and keeping the plants going. But now the plants are going. The issue of cash is at the terminal end of recovery. And so it's a question of ECG putting in place measures to recover that. One, in terms of the ones that they know have consumed the power but yet have not paid, which you are saying in excess of 260 million. And then two, the ones that are lost in transmission, which we're saying now that on the basis...
What I referenced was only to the health facilities.
Right, I'm saying that. So that's what we know for now. There's more. Now, and what we're learning also, best practice provides that even if you lose anything in transmission, it should be less than the 30% we're losing. So we've seen the source of the problem. And this one, based on what the diagnosis is, it is not government, which my people in the NDC should now appreciate and say, okay, well now, how do we help ECG to go after the money? Because we know where the money is. And Ben made a very important point that must be emphasized, which is that because of that under-recovery, the bill is sent to government to pay. So that you're not, it's not government that is creating a problem. It's a system that is creating a problem. That
And
system we know.
It's not new. That's the point.
Understand? So it's a legacy problem, and I wanted to make sure.
It's always been there.
Yeah, it's a legacy problem. So how do we address that issue? And for me, if we can have the NDC. In fact, Doc, I think you should speak more for the NDC, because in the small subtle politics that you put in there, I appreciate. But on balance, Doc has been fair to the matter to say that there are challenges, right? So what we have to do is to have the NDC, roll back on the politics and have us discuss the problem dispassionately and say that ECG needs help. What can we do? How do we fix that excessive loss in transmission? How do we get people to pay their bills? In fact,
when they face this recurrent problem, they told you not to politicize this. You refused to listen to them. So why should they listen to you today?
But I'm saying that back then, the challenge that were faced were twofold. One, directly looking at the government in terms of responsibility to deal with the generation problem. But here, it is consumption recovery issue, which is quite separate from what they faced. So right now, we can be dispassionate about it to say that as a country, what do we want to do with ECG to make sure that they are able to attain full cost recovery, to make sure that we don't have this deficit that creates the shortfall that then gets sent to government. And again, Ben made a very solid, important point, which is that then you then go to sacrifice the budget to then be able to pay for that. But the fiscal positions are locked in at the beginning of the year. So the flexibility.
What do you know is being done? Lives and livelihoods are at stake.
Right. You see, so government is working. And I think that some very firm information that I have suggests that the situation has normalized and that going forward, the generation will be a bit stable. But that is just a moment in time. What we need to do based on the normalization of the situation would be, how do we tackle the problem we know is there? All right. And also, in addition to the problem, how it compounded this particular year, starting from January and the rest, I understand, I think Ben would know and Doc would know as well, some plans went down, not on a schedule, shutdown, but then were on,
I think they've both mentioned.
Exactly.
Right.
So that also accounts for what the situation has been. And so for me, proper, we apologize. Second, we need to, take out the politics and tackle the issue. And I think Ben has set it up properly. And if we follow that dimension, I think that we'll get where the problem is.
For the nearly 3 decades that I've done this job, I've had these assurances about fixing this problem long term. What's the guarantee that this time it will be fixed?
Well, this time, if we take away the politics, is key. Because as I keep telling you and praising Ben, I listened to him on Good Morning Ghana. I wasn't very convinced. I meant to call you. But the way you set it up today is clear. You understand? I think maybe the line of questioning helped to break it down and you were able to put the bare fact information. So we know where the problem is now. How do we help ECG to recover? We know the issue of power thievery, we know exists. How do we solve it? And if we can focus on that, and begin to come up with ideas in this country, I think we have the capacity to do that. Doc is here, Ben is here, very seasoned people. Let's apply brain power to that and see how do we tackle the deficit that ECG is incurring. And that is what is creating the problem.
Samson.
Yes, so you should bring your mind to what government is doing and help to look for the solutions. That's what he's saying.
Samson, we don't reinvent the wheel. It was for this very reason that under the compact, we said until we fix the distribution.
Which compact are you talking about?
The MCC, Millennium Challenge Corporation, the contract.
The thing that because of
PDS,
they withdrew, took it away.
Yes, because of the...
How much you know?
Initially, the Millennium Challenge Corporation was to put in about $500 million to distribution alone. We had identified distribution as the biggest
so that's no more available to us.
Weakness in the chain.
That's no more available to us.
Chain. No.
About 192 million.
Okay.
And then that was just from compact. Then the big boys who were to come in were also to invest at least another $500 million. So we're to pump about $1 billion into the distribution in fixing the very situation ECG is facing today. It was a political decision that messed that up. So we cannot turn around and ignore decisions which were taken for
a political decision that messed that up. What does that mean?
Precisely. Before the NPP came to power, Nana Akufo-Addo's government came into power, the compact was well advanced. Under the rules, and I had the fortune of going to cabinet, we had two options: privatization of ECG, where we were to sell ECG or at least part of E-shares, and setting out a concession. I went to cabinet and said, look, the concession option is a better choice in that Ghana will still own all the assets. But we are asking somebody to run the assets for a period, set the parameters right, set the commercial dynamics that we need in ECG or in the distribution sector right. And so we opted for the concession. And in order to attract those with the know-how and those with the deep pockets to come in and set it right, we said, look, we're prepared to let, for the concession, the big boys have 80% equity in the concession. Ghanaian companies, because we believe in local content, can have up to 20%. And the applications from the big boys were very positive. Then there's a change in government. The government then decides, without adequate consultation, without, in a silo, that no, Ghanaians must have 51%. And in business, 51% means so much other than just the number. It means the big whoever was coming in to put his money, apart from the compact money, minimum 500 billion, lost boardroom control. So they pulled out, and we decided to have PDS. And that one, to even the PDS, we messed it up.
All right, Ben, the suggestion from Richard is that we need solutions. Is that to suggest that the solutions are not known?
No, I think maybe from where Richard sits.
Are you not tired talking these solutions?
From where he sits, he is getting to appreciate the issues. But I think what we have to really process is that the energy sector problems are hurting the economy. And the earlier politically we give up, the energy sector and allow it to run as business, the better it will be for all of us.
What will it mean to
Doc
allow
was
it
talking
to
about lack
run
of
as
investment.
business?
I mean, government has been investing in ECG. When we lost the PDS program, government invested more than 700 million. The investor was supposed to do 500 million to reduce the losses from 23 to about 18. We invested over 700 million and we jumped the losses to 30. All right? So it means that government throws money in and the waste deepens. So we need to address that critical problem of allowing the energy sector to run as business.
Yes, what do you mean by that?
So the problem is not just ECG. It's a whole political economy issue around it. I mean, the procurement around it is not only ECG workers or management which is controlling it. There are politicians, ministers, those you may not even know, who are controlling procurement in the space and actually siphoning the resources that could actually retool the system, procure more efficient systems that work. There are meters that don't work, but they have been procured, they've been paid. All right, there are transformers that will be procured, they will not work. And then we are paid for it, and the state keeps paying. We need to give up that.
Private investors will mean we are going to pay more for electricity.
It doesn't mean necessarily that we're going to pay more. That's why there's a regulator.
That is for certain, isn't it?
The regulator, the way you do it, you can't, government has proven that it cannot regulate itself. PRC is failing. I mean, we've had the banter between PRC and ECG, and that is really what it is. They cannot regulate ECG because ECG boss was appointed by the same president, and they all feel equal. And therefore, they cannot be regulated. That's why the cash waterfall mechanism says, pull every money into a pot and let's share.
If government cannot absorb a certain amount that ECG requires or in the power sector is required, what's the use of government anyway? they are paying their taxes and they are buying the power.
Well, question, why should government be paying for somebody's electricity? I have consumed electricity, I should pay for it. I'm stealing power, and somebody who is supposed to make sure I don't steal power is blaming people who are stealing and say, go and
what's the state's duty and responsibility to me as a citizen? To just give everything to private hands and watch? Then what's the use of a government?
It's as good as asking why is the state not selling water and private people selling the water, all right? The state has power to regulate everybody and make sure that we are all in line. If you are selling power, you are selling water, you are selling food, you are supposed to pay taxes.
Then we privatize the government.
We are not privatizing government. The government assuming its rightful responsibility and ensuring that it can control everybody, regardless of whether it's your own money or it's the state's money. And the state has that power, and the law gives the state the power to manage and regulate everybody. And I think if the state itself has failed to do the business side of things, it has to give up that role and allow the private sector to come in so that they can properly regulate the sector. And I think that is a major, major problem. And if we don't pay attention to it, I mean, Doc was talking about the export challenges that we do have. And that, for me, is also another big area for us to look at. Because once you send the signals that you are not reliable, then you lose the market. The only competitive advantage we have at this point on the export market is reliability. Nigeria is selling around 6 cents per kilowatt hour. And we are selling over 10 cents per kilowatt hour. But because we are reliable, they prefer Ghana's power.
Oh, I see.
So now, if Nigeria improves reliability, there's no market for Ghana.
And we lose.
All right? And we lose.
So we can't even do business.
We can't do business. So there's that urgency for us to improve not just reliability, but cost competitiveness and efficiency.
What else,
for us to keep the export market.
Does the state not fail at? That's the issue. You have this, it looks like buy and sell, and you are failing at it. Yeah, so maybe in a minute your final words about whether you think it is necessary to have a timetable now, regardless of what Richard just said, that somewhat it's being managed. Should there be a timetable? Yes, Ben, start.
No, for me, I think, we have been in this space at some point, even 50 megawatt, we have demanded timetable. So for 300, 500 megawatt, it would be hypocritical for me to say that. The most importantly, if there's no timetable, what happens is that everybody else is at the discretion of GridCo operators. So they sit in the control room like here, and they can see all the feeders in the country, and they have fun. This one goes off because I don't have enough. That one goes off. So they can decide that one place will go off multiple times because there's no plan for it. And that's what is happening. So GridCo decides who should go off to save the grid.
That's disrespecting the
because
customer.
Because if they don't take you off, the entire system collapses, and they have to take somebody off.
Okay.
So we need to have
in your vocabulary, this is not Dumsor.
There's the problem. Dumsor, like once the light goes off and come on, I don't think we should be arguing about the description and how we interpret it.
It's so important. I have never been a fan of the term. For me, it's load shedding. It was load shedding yesterday, it's load shedding today. Except that for those of you in the media space, it's like when you employ somebody to protect your assets. If it's from a certain part of the country, it's a watchman. If it's from another part of the country, it's a security guard. What happened yesterday is the same happening today. And yet, even in labeling, if it was NDC, it was load shedding. If it's another party, it's something else. Let's be consistent.
We need a timetable?
Absolutely, absolutely. We are shedding in excess of 600 on some days during peak, in excess of 600. And the export, like Ben stated, the shedding of export, we don't even bring it in the picture. So if we were to bring the export in the picture, on some days we are shedding 800 megawatts.
Yes. Don't you agree with the public? They insist and demand that there should be a timetable for this. The Leila Abubakar, External Communications Manager of the ECG, says, the thing is, we just want people to be aware that when your power goes off, it is not always a matter of load shedding. We know this.
Right. So I think that the difficulty is how divisive the politics is, how passionate it is, how misleading the conversation then gets to become. Now, if you're hungry because you are yet to cook, you have a different situation. But if you're hungry because you don't have anything, it's also a different situation. The situation of Dumsor yesterday was because you're hungry, you don't have food, right? So whatever you do, you are just hungry, right? So timetable, no timetable, you're just particularly hungry. But today, you can provide a timetable. It's just a matter of time your food will be ready because you have what it takes to prepare. Those two situations are not the same. But the unfortunate thing is that the NDC is lumping everything in together. As you're hungry, you don't have food. You have food, we're just taking time to prepare. As you said, they mentioned before I came in, there are challenges with generation in terms of the equipment going down. What I understood is that some of them were scheduled for maintenance, but because of demand at certain points, they were not shut down as planned. So then as machines, they went down. These issues have been addressed, they have been addressed. I also understand there is some need.
They should give the people the timetable.
I agree. So we have to understand, first of all, comprehend the problem. But then the NDC is making it difficult.
And I think
a timetable appears to be a concession that this is doing.
Exactly, and that's the difficulty of the politics. Otherwise, I agree with Ben to the extent that the problem is understood.
So it's the difficulty of the politics.
Yeah, see, I'm coming. Yes, of course. But the point is, when yesterday the politics was difficult, it was practically because you didn't have any food to cook whatsoever. But today there's the food. You can differentiate that. And so, okay, we know the problem today is not about generation, it's about collection. And so the ideas and the conversation that we advance, no. If ECG was collecting and all of that, we will be in a position, because Ben's rendition, Ben's rendition of the matter, Ben's rendition of the matter sets us up. It says that somebody consumes, doesn't pay, the bill goes to government to pay. I understand it's not new, but yours yesterday was both this and something else. We're saying that we have made a progress, and the situation now is to support ECG, collect the money. And I agree with you, Samson, 100%, that if you make this, and that's the only point, Ben, we are going to disagree today, if you make this 100% company, that rationale, you put a lot of citizens at risk. Right. And the cost of electricity in this country cannot be afforded because there's no competition. In other places where there's competition, you can trust that competition will stabilize the price. But in this case, it is very difficult. If I am the only one who provides it, I regulate.
Abena Osei Asare at the finance ministry says ECG loses about 30% of the investment of the power they produce. How does this come about? The illegal structures. So you are involved. You watching and listening now and pointing fingers at the managers. The illegal structures, illegal meters, and everything. They are human beings who are doing these things. Thank you very much. Dr. Kwabena Donkor is MP Pru East and former Minister for Power. Ben Boakye is Executive Director, ASEP. That's Africa's Center for Energy Policy. Richard Ahiagba is Director of Communications of the New Patriotic Party. We'll share your messages soon if we are able to get some because of the internet problems that you already know. That's like a double whammy, right? And we will be joined by Moses Baden, Group CEO, Margins Group, Dr. Nana Asine, Lecturer, School of Technology and Social Sciences, GIMPA, Desmond Israel, Lawyer and Information Security Data Privacy Practitioner. He is in the USA. They will join us for the second segment. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. Before we talk about Ghana Card and how to get rid of elements that want to deceive and want to cheat in our country and get a clean system, let me quickly share with you a couple of the messages sent in by our viewers and listeners. Papa Ansa from Latte Ekwapim says, I've been advocating for the use of solar in all these health facilities, schools, universities, parliament, and also government facilities in Ghana. Government should make it a duty-free on solar panels and even on their batteries, so it will ease the pressure on ECG. ECG is always telling lies. Nana is sending this from, says Peaceland. Where is that? Why is Richard Ahiagba always on the attacking and politicking anytime he's to answer a question? All that we are saying is, don't tell me the issue. Solve the problem, period. How are we taking away politics in our issues when all leading our institutions are from a ruling party? Please, let's stop deceiving ourselves. Please fix the situation because you have the man. Stephen in Tema says, the NPP man is so unfair to us Ghanaians. What do they take us for? They should wait for December. So disheartening, a government we voted into power. Nene Koda sends in this one. He says, can ECG be sued because I have paid for power and I'm not getting it? You can explore, see how that works. Sape Agbo says, Richard Ahiagba is being economical with the truth. The under-recovery of cost of generation has always been a challenge. It's not only limited to the NPP. Past government had experienced the same challenge, yet NPP was loudly shouting and accused JM as the one who invested in Dumsor. It was the challenge of the recovery of costs that informed the NDC government's decision to establish the Energy Sector Recovery Levy. The NPP came to power and mortgaged the funds that had accrued in the Energy Sector Recovery Levy. And finally, Hati Anafo says all NPP needs is money to buy gas, but they can't generate money, even after selling energy domestic and foreign. One problem, buy gas, and they can't fix that. All right, thanks for your messages. And as you may have heard, the MP Dominic Ayene, in that clip, he said he was awestruck to see what Ghana Card was doing, those in charge of it were doing. And they have found 45,000 passports, which we can call fake. They have found another 45,000 driver's licenses, which, you know, can be used to do all sorts of wrong in the society. As many as 130,000 NHIS cards, which also do not exist on the database. There's also a number of SNAIT cards, about 166,000. And this is what is bringing this topic back for discussion as they met with Parliament to speak about their problems and what needs doing immediately. Of course, you also have followed Dr. Bawumia launching the Ghana Card for at birth. What exactly will it do? As of the 15th of February 2024, they have registered so many Ghanaians. I won't let the wind out of the sails of the MD of the Margins Group, those who are in charge of this business. Now, in the studio is Moses Baden, Group CEO of Margins Group. Dr. Nana Asne is Lecturer, School of Technology and Social Sciences, GIMPA, and will be joined by Desmond Israel, a lawyer and information security data privacy practitioner in the USA. Also, that's security surveillance, among others. Thank you very much for making time to join us, sir.
Thank you.
Right. So let's begin. For those of us who have not actually followed the Ghana Card story, why should we believe these MPs, these politicians, who never agree, but for once are agreeing and saying Ghana Card is what will give us a clean society? First of all, what does that mean, that it will give us a clean society?
Well, I think that the visits by the MPs on both sides of the Subsidiary Legislation Committee and Defense and Interior was an eye-opener, because most of the comments made up the media on Ghana card, I think is merely born out of ignorance, because people don't understand the concept of it. And as was articulated by both sides of the House, it was also being politicized sometimes, seen in the political lens that it is for voting. But the Ghana card essentially is not just a card, it's a whole system, a national ID system, and we're able to demonstrate that to them. This system is made up of infrastructure and platforms that are in 18 different segments with leading different kinds of subject experts to run it. And this is integrated into what is the national ID system. The card is only one part of the 18. Right? Now, in order to produce such a card, you need to have very high certifications. And our subsidiary, Intelligent Cards Production Systems, is the most certified factory in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, with more than 8 top-level international certifications.
Okay, you take us through, because I understand from my production side that you're going to run us through a few slides to give us a better appreciation of it as background before we begin to ask you a couple of questions. But how many have we captured on the system so far, and how many cards are out? Because that has been a thorny issue.
We've captured in excess of 17.8 million of the population above 15, which constitutes above 85% of the population.
How many of them have cards?
The cards that have cards printed is 17.7 million plus. And cards delivered is short of 640,000 that people are yet to collect.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. So help us to understand you. So we'll ask you a number of questions. People have sent in some of them.
Okay. I mean, you know, the Margins Group will be 34 years on 13 December. And we incorporated in 1990. We started as a print furnishing business and a lamination business. In 95, we changed our focus to identity. And since 95, we introduced laminated IDs, moving from passbooks with pictures and so on. And we've evolved it to what you see today. So that evolution involves going from laminated ID cards to the latest Ghana card. Whilst ID used to be a fiduciary thing, basically looking at the security of a physical document, today it's also digital, and we combine both. So our vision is to connect identities used broadly of both people and things securely to transactions and solutions and products. And the Ghana card is only one of that. So since 1990, our products have been in the pockets of every Ghanaian, whether they know it or not. And we've produced identity systems from the fiduciary old world to the digital world for banks, for government institutions, for corporates, and so on, for 34 years. And we've done every event in Ghana, that, you know, from non-aligned movement to the sports events. We produce all the IDs, both the IT and the physical documents. And we produce Ghana passports and laminates since the 90s. And today we organized at the Margins ID Group level. We have a first-class certified factory, as I said, manufacturing secure documents, which can manufacture more than 20 million secure documents a year. And then we have a technology company that builds software and infrastructure that connects these documents to transactions for third parties securely. So that's our 34-year journey. And we didn't arrive here just by chance. You know, it's a long process. And we have lasted this. The Ghana card is only the latest manifestation of what we do.
We understand that what you're doing, as those of us who have participated in appreciate, we simply are coming to a single source of identification. What exactly is that, and what's the benefit in that?
Okay, you know, identity is a legal question, and then it's a technical question, you know. So the legal identity of a person is determined by foundational law. In the case of Ghana, citizenship is determined by our constitutions, our various constitutions since independence and prior to independence, the fundamental law. And that fundamental law dictates that if your parents or your grandparents is Ghanaian, then you're a Ghanaian citizen. Ours is not citizenship by where you are born. It's by blood, you know. So even though citizenship is a fact, it's also a question of law. So how do you evidence that citizenship? Now, the situation before the Ghana Card project started as far back as 2003, when President Kufuor started this organizing the Ghana Card project on the importance of having this clean society, was to find that single source of truth that will establish once and for all.
Single source of truth.
Which will establish legally through a process that you're who you claim you are. And then take that relevant data from you and create a physical document that you could then use to identify yourself whilst going through transactions in order to remove fake identities, which is really the foundation for all crime. So that's the first principle. But how you do that technically is that different countries are at different stages of identity infrastructure. If you take Northern Europe, for instance, because their records are well kept, they have birth certificates that you can rely on. They have an addressing system that you can rely on. They have school records, medical records, and so on, that these identities are tied to through your life cycle. So they are able to, for instance, adopt what you call a federated identity system, which means that they don't need to create a database from scratch. Using these existing databases, they can consolidate what you call a federated identity system in order to create a unique identity. But it comes to the situation in Ghana, because our records were truncated, you cannot really say whether these silo federated identities can be relied on. So recognizing this problem, all governments over the 5 presidents that I have seen, and I know each of them personally, have noticed that in order to be able to deliver services to citizens efficiently, you need to know who your citizens are and where they are living. But if I go to any of the silo databases, like a passport office, and I give them the information that I'm Samson Lardy, and they give me a passport saying Samson Lardy, even if they take my biometrics, it connects to me, but my legal identity is wrong. Then if these databases are not connected, I'm able to go to SNIT and say I'm Moses Baden with the same identity, same biometrics. But this time, I'm 24 because I want to increase my pension age. And then I can play for the Stylist because I'm 17. So you can imagine that over the years, we've created these silos that have identities that are not reliable and that have duplicates if you put the silos together. So a clean and powered society should have a process where you can collect legal identity through a verified legal process and then create a database that has all the fields that public sector and private sector entities use to do their work in establishing identity, and then connect that with biometrics so that you can now harmonize this data, foundational database, with these silo databases and remove the duplicates so that we have a clean society where people are who they claim they are. Once you achieve that clean society and database, you're able to then have effective planning and budgeting. Precisely. You know exactly where all your farmers are, you know exactly where all your school children are, what ages they are. So the school feeding program budgets, for instance, will not be bloated. Now, in order to save money, instead of government procuring several parts of this 18 segmented subsystem that I've told about, government, for instance, buys data capture equipment for passports, buys transmission equipment, buys biometric systems, and that's same for SNIT, that's same for all the other silos, DVL and so on. If you calculate the cost, and this is empirical, we've done the research, over 10 years, government spends $1.5 billion on these silo databases. So imagine removing all the silo databases and building one foundational database that feeds the silos in real time, with real-time, relevant, up-to-date modern technology. Then you eliminate the 1.5 billion. And if you today go to DVLA, for instance, and you want to register your car, they don't have to ask your name. I'm saying today, I'm not saying maybe. All you need to do is to give them your national ID number. They can do a one-to-one verification. Your data goes from NIA to DVLA in under a second and populates their data enrollment system. Then they add the vehicle-centric data. So you can't have a false name tied to a false vehicle. It's automatic. It's being fed by NIA. DVLA does not need to buy all these expensive segments. And so it goes for all the other institutions, the silo databases. So you will be who you claim you are, and corruption will be reduced because when people do transactions, we know that they're who they are. If I buy 10 cars, GRA knows that I bought $1 million worth of cars. And if my tax is only $100, it can't be. It provides the basis for people being honest and clean and objective. And it provides the basis for a data-driven decision-making process for the whole society, both public and private.
Okay, so now hold it on there for us. I want to bring you in here briefly. When you first read the news, and all of this happened within this week, Dr. Bawumia says, now football age is over. Now pension age and your age at home is over, because right from birth, you are going to be captured until you exit. And then Parliament's, the aspect from Parliament pops up. And then we hear suddenly the tens of thousands who are faking around the place. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me in a way that something is going on and something is going on right. The first instance is, how did they get to know that there are fake people around or fake cards around? It means now we are able to compare with a particular system. So that is very important, even though it's something that has happened, but it tells us that we are making progress. In my opinion, when I read the news, I was not shocked. It's supposed to happen. If you already have several of databases, and now you are trying to harmonize it, the other one had some information, probably they were not there. So I mean, I'm okay with it. I think it's normal, but we need to progress further by looking at how do we get those things off. For example, a typical example is when Dr. Bawumia said that we are going to have a registration at birth. It's the foundation of what we can make sure that we don't have people later on coming to say any other thing.
Right.
So another thing is, how do we get it at birth? Do we get a number just as we are born, or we get it at a hospital? These are instances that we must also look at it so that, and those information must feed NIA direct.
Right. So he says they explain that you get the number, but I think when you turn, is it 8 or so, then you could access the card. 6, then you could now access the card.
Yeah, it's true. The number, then I don't put importance on the card. I put importance on the number.
And now that number is also your TIN.
Yes. So that becomes, in fact, when they started talking about a TIN with GRA, I was one of the first guys who said that what they are doing will not work. And I'm happy he mentioned it now. We should push all the money into NIA, because that is where we can all verify information. When you start to be having those silos, we will always be having those issues. So what it means is that we have a particular database that we can all check our information with. And I think that is where we are now. The issue now is, how do we move forward from here with some of these issues that we are, seeing? Then we can...
One of the questions you asked is, how do you know that these tens of thousands are actually people who are faking their identity and we don't need them to compromise our systems? We come to you for the answer. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. My guest for this segment, Moses Bading, Group CEO, Margins Group. This will be the very first public interview on a television that they are doing on the media. So we thank you so much that you agreed when we called you to be here. Dr. Nana Asene is lecturer, School of Technology and Social Sciences, GIMPA. Desmond Israel is lawyer and information security data privacy practitioner. Now, a question popped up. All these tens of thousands, hundreds really, that you find are faking the identity around and are harmful to us getting a clean society. How do you come by that? How are we sure that it is actually the fact that 45,000 people are using driver's license or passports that ought not be in the system?
Okay, it's in the conceptualization and the design of the system. First of all, the system follows the law. Then it follows the best technology. And then the objectives of the design is to harmonize data so that people are who they claim they are, and they exist only once in the database. So you mentioned at birth. Our job is to assist the NIA, which has the mandate, to implement what its acts envisage, Act 750 and Act 995, and to also enforce LI 2111, Section 7, which Parliament's subsidiary legislation has passed. So that objective in NIA's law is to create a reliable, credible register, accurate register, and to preserve the privacy of this register and the confidentiality. That is the mandate of NIA. Okay, so in designing the data capture system, we put in all the fields that these silo data already collect, because we knew we had to match them. Then we collect the biometrics, face, fingerprints, and eyes. Then we do duplicate in real time. When we're actually in the field, in every village that you saw, we trained over 80,000 people to do this registration cumulatively. Whilst they are doing that in the whole of Ghana, in a single day, we did up to 250,000 registrations. We're comparing in real time this data to the data that already exists in the database and making sure that there are no duplicates and everybody has a unique number. So by the time we're done with the database, we understand that everybody in the NIA database exists only once. As Doctor mentioned, they have a unique number on the register tied to their biometrics. Then we then connected all these silos in real time to the NIA database after we had received the data and the information that they had presented. Every single card, every piece of paper, every proof of identity that you presented at the registration is scanned and attached to your record and can be accessed in real time. So when we connected SNIT, for instance, because SNIT has fingerprints, we run the SNIT database against the NIA database in order to be sure that all the identities in there are secure and they are unique. And that's how you come with a multiple. So I take Samson, your number, I ran against the SNIT database with your fingerprints. And I found that all of a sudden, you, Samson, you appear as Moses Baden as well. Or that you have two SNIT numbers. So because we run against a unique foundational database, we'll get the duplicates. And then we inform SNIT and NIA, because the NIA is actually the mandate holder. They are the mandate holders. We are just technical partners of NIA. So the executive secretary of NIA and the governing board, they make the decisions and say, okay, managers, let's look at this presentation of the data. We work with NIA technical parties and they say, okay, this is against the law. Let's inform SNIT. And SNIT will say, oh, this means our pensioners messed up. People are there with the wrong names, they've changed their names. How do we clean up? Then they clean it up. The cleaning up is a legal and policy issue. And rest with the Minister of NIA, which today is Interior, the Executive Secretary of NIA, Professor Tefa, who's doing a fantastic job, by the way, and the Governing Board, which is doing a fantastic job. So they would then direct, together with the institution involved, what does the law say? How do we investigate these? What happens? That we're not part of. We just keep that. So you take passports, for instance. There's a passport database, but there's no deduplication going on. And these passports, you don't know whether the passport is fake or because there's no real-time online biometric verification. So today, when you register for a passport, the process is that you're supposed to use your Ghana card. As soon as we got your Ghana card details, we send it to passport immediately. And we verify against their database. And they return saying that, yeah, we know Moses Baden has this passport number and that passport number. So if it does not exist, we flag it. There are various instances of duplication. One is that the passport doesn't exist at all. So the question is this a fake passport? Or is this something to do with the passport's own system? That the database is lost or we don't know. We give it to NIA and say, hey, Moses Baden presented this passport when he registered. It doesn't exist. Passport has not been
so now, as a result of this process,
yes,
if you were holding that passport that doesn't exist in the system, that does not correspond or communicate with your Ghana card,
yes,
you can use that.
So that's a policy and legal decision. So you have to first investigate. I mean, this is my legal background.
This is the same thing you have done with
for every single
for the Electoral Commission.
Everybody.
And they are talking about how their system is better cleaned up.
Everybody. We found, I think, in the Electoral Commission when they registered with the Ghana card in 2019, and then they said, we want to check all these Ghana cards with these fingerprints. Who did they belong to? These are their voter's ID number. And then you find out, okay, Samson's using voter ID card 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But so is Doctor. But Samson is in Takrady and Doctor is in Bogota. How come they have the same national ID number? We can compare both the alphanumeric information, that this number appears multiple times,
okay,
and that this fingerprint appears multiple times, and that this person who registered as 18 in the national ID database is actually 21 in the voter's ID. So this harmonization, and so that, this is the first time I'm doing this on the press because we're there to do the work, not to be in media, but it's become necessary to explain. The question, for instance, of the voter's ID, it's not a question of guarantors. It's a question of harmonization. Because if you exist in a silo, I can go and tell EC that I'm 18, maybe I'm 15. But you're not comparing my data to any foundational database in real time. So when it's time to vote, I vote no matter what guarantor I use. So it is not a guarantor issue. It's a harmonization issue. As doctors pointed out, if you harmonize a unique number, foundational, which is biometric, and that has a legal process, even if somebody else is going to steal in the legal process, you'll find out in the end.
Okay, I'll go to this one, but I need you to, maybe a question of cost also. But is it possible that someone could have a Ghana card which is also fake? And what do they do with that?
It is not possible to have a genuine Ghana card that's fake. It is possible to, for instance, theoretically, break into an NIA office, steal a Ghana card, take a printer, print some fake information on it, find a laminate or bribe somebody to get a laminate, put it on it, and it will look like a Ghana card, but it's fake. Because if we verify it, we'll find out it doesn't exist.
If the bank asks you for your card and you give it to them?
Because on your Ghana card are your 10 fingerprints,
okay,
and your face. And we can compare live in seconds, your live fingerprints to the card. Whether there's in a completely offline situation, where you're not connected to anything. Doctor said he believed in the number, not the card per se.
Right.
But the reason why the card is so important as well as the register is that whether you're online or offline, assuming you don't have a connection, I can compare your fingerprints to the card in real time.
Right. So
and we'll find out it's fake.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Over 85%, you said, of undocumented adult Ghanaians are now registered. At what cost to us? Do I pay for the card? How do I get it?
All successive governments have agreed or come to the conclusion that in order to have everybody included and to have this foundational database that will build a clean society, the first card should be free.
First card?
Should be free. So that everybody, rich or poor, will have access to a legal identity as a Ghanaian. So the record of their life isn't official. So that they can use that identity to access government services, commercial services, and financial services, especially in this digital age. Digitally, remotely, so that people can get services without having to bribe anybody, without the corruption, and this will then. So this cost is what government has decided to bear. In the case of our relationship with NIA, this cost is borne by the private sector. And this is where the misunderstanding is. Government is not financing this. This is being financed by us.
Say that again.
Government is not the one financing the national ID, at least not the initial financing. We are financing the entire technical system. And NIA is financing the operations. But in this system, we build the system, government tests it. If it doesn't work as it is, they don't have to pay. So right from the central systems that government bought so that they own the data, to the cards that's in everybody's pocket, is actually pre-financed by us. And we don't get paid if it doesn't work. And our payment formula, irrespective of whatever ignorant statements are.
Sorry, you are in business to make profit.
Of course.
So how do you make profit?
The profit is contracted. It's contractual. You know, we invested up to 169 million initially in the Ghana card project. Now, we get paid on our debts and our equity, guaranteed. And we give government the famous 1.2 billion model so that government can then charge services to different parties.
Okay.
The money does not come to us. The money is fees and charges passed by Parliament. It goes to an escrow agent, and government guarantees to pay us our 10% of the debt we've raised and 70% of the equity. That's as simple as that. And then
that is
it pays
fixed by law.
It's in the contract that's available to all parliamentary members.
Right. Let me get to Desmond.
Yes.
Desmond Israel, thank you very much for making time to join us from where you are in the U.S. Listening to the conversation so far, and in the course of the week, reading the revelations and the launch of the Ghana card, as it were, for babies, how do you analyze that as a Ghanaian living in a country where you must be familiar with this sort of single source of truth, documentation of citizens?
I think at this point, listening to the conversation, one thing that comes to mind is integrity assurance. And we need to give credit to the NIA as a technical partner for doing that job. Because by law, as you've already noted with the background, I mean, by law, they are required to ensure these integrity. As in, because they are working with the NIA. The NIA is who owns the data by law. They are what we would call the data controller under our Data Protection Act. So the technical partner in this case, margins, are the data processors, okay? And so for me, they are doing a good job ensuring that the NIA's mandate in terms of the integrity assurance of the data that is being held is actually in check. Now, back to the fact that we are getting zero age on board. It adds to the single source of truth. Why? Currently, you're looking at the data that has been identified being like 1% of our population having either unlawful cards, which may have been procured maybe through fraud or through error, or maybe through data inconsistency, because it could also be that maybe these silo sovereignty that we used to have or we're currently having, which we are trying to phase out, may have created this problem that maybe they're moving from one database to the other and somebody's identity could not be moved, and therefore there are data inconsistency issues. Now, if you go to age 0, you would have guaranteed some sort of identity protection for age 0 because the person would have been captured into an existing database, and they will grow with that database up to the point that they get issued with the card. Now, I'll tell you why even the issuance of the card is not such a big deal at age 0. What we wanted at law was a national identity register. That is the legal requirement under our law. And then the NIS, which is the National Identification System, developed and currently managed by the technical partner, is just the technical manifestation of the requirement at law. So it's pretty much going to a school and saying, I want to see the register of your students here. That's what the technical partner would give us. Okay, this is the NIS, that is your register. So what we actually wanted was to have a unique register of every single person, every single citizen, every single person that's been captured under the NIA, NIR laws for the purposes of identification. And that, for me, it's already on point by the structure that we have now. And if we are doing age 0, like I've said, we are guaranteeing the integrity assurance right from birth.
But how can you be so sure, Desmond? You're dealing with a third-party private entity providing these, and you're still talking about, integrity and privacy matters. People always have concerns about their data and the possibility of it being harvested for other purposes.
Okay, I mean, I get where you're going with this, but first of all, when we set up the legal regime, we knew that even from our Data Protection Act, not just the NIA Act, we knew that there is definitely going to be the concern of using third parties to process some of these things. So by the wisdom of the legislature, we already agree that we need to put a third party in there. If we don't deal with this third party issue, we would come to a point where we will not be able to deliver some of these solutions. What is important is that the NIA is the mandated body. That is the body that owns the data. That is the body that we can point to. Concerning, the technical security of it, one thing I can give you, for instance, the card that is currently being used, okay, is a chip-based card. From a security point of view, is the highest you can get when it comes to cards that are less prone to cloning. And these NIA cards currently they even have storage on them. I think about 140 kilobytes. I stand correction from the expert in studio, but that and has what they call applets. Applets are small softwares that run on it. So
yeah, they say they have 14 applets for data storage, 10 fingerprints. There is also face, there's biometric data, and there is data harmonization, all in one card.
Yes, all in one card. And so that's the assurance, that's actually the technical integrity assurance I want to talk about. So even by the design of the technical provider, they've given you top of the range. I mean, if you're talking about security generally, there's nothing like 100% security. He gave an example. There could be physical intrusion into the environment. There could be collusion by staff. But what is important is technology checks itself. So we have built a system currently by his presentation so far, both to Parliament and from what he's speaking about in the studio. We've built a system where we can easily do the validation with the system. We don't need a human validation like we've had with the silo sovereignty that we've experienced. And that's why you see so many, over 300,000 cards from different agencies being popped up as non-existent cards. It tells you about those systems themselves, whether those systems are even able to check themselves, because if they're doing their own redundancy, duplicacy checks, then we will not have so many of these cards out there. But to the extent that the NIA system has been built such that it could recheck itself, then we are giving some assurance that, okay, we can get a level of integrity from the current system that we are building. And because they are using the chip based with the storage on it, it makes it easier for the harmonization that you are talking about. It's just a matter of time that all these databases would just have to speak to the NIA, and then we should be getting value for money.
So what sort of Ghana do you envisage if this is smoothly implemented to the end? To the extent that now we have about 85% of undocumented Ghanaians on that single source. What kind of Ghana do you envisage?
So if you are a bit familiar with the Estonian system, then you are looking at the possibility of an EID. Now, the EID would serve as your reference to driving authorization, your reference to travel, your reference to health, education, social, essential services that you can access and the likes. So because of where we have started from, trying to build it on a digital platform, try to consolidate it on a chipset card, trying to have everything in a central place, you would end up with an EID, and it would be easy. I mean, I've traveled and I get to airports, and some of the European countries, I did mention Estonia, all they need to do is pull out their ID. They don't carry passports around. Just pull out their ID, and it's authenticated on this international travel identification system. So that's exactly where we are going. For the purposes of the way we are governing ourselves, we can also be looking at a level of transparency, in terms of distribution of resources. You have an ID, we can pick you up from the NIA system. So it means that if there is electricity to your end, the NIA card plus your GPS gives us like a unique or a more like a a more primary, more solid source of identifying who we have given that service to.
My final question to you will be, I don't know how long you have been in our local system. I suppose you have been in the US for a while, but we have failed at almost every project. What's the level of your faith that this will work so that your country, Ghana, will also mimic, to a certain extent, what you have in the developed world, where this gives you security, crime rate, and everything else will be checked?
Right. So I've spent a greater part of my life in Ghana, so I'm well aware of how things work.
Okay.
But let me just say with this level of confidence that you started off with a bipartisan parliamentary appreciation of the issue. It doesn't always happen. When you have the legislature coming together to say we need to support this process, then somebody like me who's almost criticized every bit of technology because I don't see it properly implemented is happier, because then we have something that we can look up to. Secondly, I think that the cost-benefit analysis started early. I heard 17.8 million being saved because we're trying to put these things together and avoid the silo-based identification, which we have. So we start with cost-benefit analysis. We have parliament buy-in. I think we also need the executive to be part of that political buy-in. We don't need to have a switch just because maybe somebody else took power and think that they want to do something else.
All right.
For once, we should continue with the consistency, and I definitely see that this will turn out well.
Okay.
Of course, it started well, so
right.
It should turn out well.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. I know it's very late where you are and reaching us. Thank you very much. And in fact, we are told that the estimated minimum cost savings is in the region of $1.5 billion US over a period of 15-year duration of the partnership. Now, you are here and you are looking at this project, and now we've come to a point where you go to bank, you go to everywhere, your ID is being demanded, and some are actually using it outside for certain purposes. And we are told about certain numbers that almost have used it to the equivalence of a passport. Do you trust that if, for example, this government were out, this will be sustained? Because that has been our bane.
Yeah. Before that, let me say something. I have spent much of my time in Finland, which database systems are one of the best in the world. About 20 years of my life is there.
Okay.
And if I see what they are doing now, you see, for a system to move on well, when the sponsors are interested in it, it means it will go on.
Sponsors is government.
The government. So here you can see almost all the government consistently trying to put resource over there because they know that is what will help them somehow to deliver what they are supposed to do. So in my opinion... And
are they really that interested when it comes to the question of elections where they would want the opportunity, as we understand, to manipulate the process, and a Ghana card will prevent you from manipulating the process?
See, that's advantage of having a technology. With technology, you get to a point you can't do anything. You just have to get into it. Where we are now, there was a time we were not using biometric for voting, but here we are now. So that's where we are going. There is nothing you can do. You just have to get into it and move with it as it is. So in my opinion, with the experience that I have and with the little discussion I've had with them, and whenever I go what is going on, I can see that there is the interest. The only thing is that more resources should be pushed over there. In my opinion, the whole system itself can pay itself back because it's data. When you talk about in Finland, the same institution doesn't take money now from the government because everybody is picking something from there and they pay something to them.
So you understand the module that he spoke about?
Yes,
Okay.
everybody picks something from
I was trying to figure
No,
it.
everybody,
because
they don't.
What I know is that we basically are involved in buy and sell issues here. And so how do you get
they
the money
don't
back?
take money from government. And you know data. Even if you pick Google, you will see that most of the things they are doing it for free, but it's not free. So
right.
data is money itself on its own. So with time, it will pay itself and it will be the basis of our development in a way. So for me, I have trust in them that they will do it, even if government changes, they have no choice than to continue where we are now.
If the citizens insist, and
Yes.
we must insist.
And we must.
Okay, and I see that in your school at Gimpa, you are advertising, you have advertised this thing you call empowering citizens, exploring the role of digital identity in socio-economic development. And you're actually hosting Professor Ken Atefa, Executive Secretary of the National Identification Authority, also Professor Samuel J. Ampoma, who is Dean, Gimpa School of Technology and Social Sciences, as well as Professor Samuel K. Bonsu, Rector, Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration, Gimpa. Flipper Sean will be moderating that. This is supposed to be Thursday, the 21st at 10 a.m.
Yep.
Is it a fee event?
No, it's a public lecture.
It's
So
a public
free.
lecture.
Yeah. So it's
Okay,
free.
right. Where are we? And we have heard, I have hosted Professor Ken Atefa speak about payments that have to be made that consistently are not made and therefore cards are not delivered. Otherwise, for instance, going into 2024 elections, we would have easily used the Ghana card to deal away with all the thievery that goes on there.
Well, Samson, this is a very broad topic. I don't think we have enough time to cover all of it. But there's a lot of false information in the media. We are profiteering, the Ghana card belongs to us, we collect money. All that is either malicious or ignorance, right? I like to think it's ignorance. And so there needs to be a proper understanding of how this project is financed. Like I said, we finance everything upfront because it's a PPP. And then government pays us. The advantage for government is
No,
that,
but I hear more good about it than I hear negatives.
yeah, that's true.
And our guests from US and from
Yes.
him from Gimpa.
These are much more knowledgeable guests.
Okay.
But everything that we're doing is either in the two acts of NIA, the LI, or in the contract. And all these are public documents. So how does it get financed? We designed the central site systems. Government wanted to own the data and the system. They could have owned the data without the system, but they wanted the system. So out of the 18, they acquired the 6 systems that hold the data. We financed and built the rest of the 12 systems at our own cost. But we use it as a service for government, right? Government took our financial model. That's like the doctor said Finland does. And by the way, we are more advanced than Finland and Denmark because we do both on the database and on the card side, right?
Yeah.
So government then took our famous 1.2 billion model, which we developed to pay IMS was 10% debt and 70% return on equity, and to pay NIA, and the excess goes to government. So the money doesn't actually belong to us. That escrow and the escrow agent is all money that belongs to a project. The excess goes to government. It's to pay the whole cost. Now, in order to make it flexible for government to do good policy, which is not basically driven only by commercial considerations, government can decide that we're going to give verification services to radio stations for free for some social benefit reasons, or all rural banks are not paying for verification. When government does that, we don't have any control over that. But our 10% debt and our 17% has to be paid. So in that case, government gives a revenue guarantee, a minimum revenue guarantee. That is when there's a shortfall in the escrow. So government has to pay. Now, because cumulatively, now we have financed something like $300 million, right? And these are from repeatable sources. I mean, we've got 5 local banks. People have to put security up, factories, buildings, directors' access to borrow that kind of money, right? The National Fund for Developing Countries, a Danish-owned fund, which is on our board, has financed multiple millions of that. The French government has financed multiple millions of that. This funding process has been to an international process. You can't borrow that kind of money without going through a proper compliance program. The government owes the money because some services that were rendered to government, just like you're talking about ECG, has not been paid. So government has to pay that gap. The inability of government to pay that gap consistently and on time would impact the project because the finance people will pull up their risk mitigation strategies. And that's what happened when the finance minister went to parliament, is that one of the biggest local financiers, Cowbank, which is also the escrow agents, which then gives assurances to all the creditors that we will pay you on time when we receive the money, pull the brakes because they hadn't received the money that we should have paid them, which is due to government delays. So there was a guarantee by government that let's agree on a payment plan. The revenue will come in, but now that we don't have the revenue, let's agree on the payment plan, and we'll pay according to that payment plan. They don't happen as fast as it should. That's what caused the problem. So it's not like we were holding government ransom, IOB. Okay. But today, since then, we've had some payments, and we've got 17.8 billion. The government still owes money, but I'm informed that they are making efforts to pay what they agreed with Parliament up to at least December 23.
Right. How time flies. Thank you very, very much indeed. Moses Bading is Group CEO, Margins Group. Dr. Nana Asene is lecturer, School of Technology and School Social Sciences at GIMPA. Desmond Israel, lawyer and information security data privacy practitioner. He joined us from the US. I'm Samson Lardy Anyenini. Thank you all very much. Have a good afternoon. This has been Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform.